and welcome to The World This Week with me, Gavin Lee. Every week we look at the past 7 days of developments. This week we have 4 distinguished correspondents. Our programme now selected from the world's top 100 podcasts. So thank you for watching. In a week that's seen unprecedented conflicts between Israel and Iran, a conflict decades in the making, unfolding by the day with extraordinary details of assassinations of the military leadership and atomic scientists, alongside non-stop air assaults on Iran's nuclear facilities, missile launch and production sites and its energy infrastructure. Iran is striking back, and there have been 7 days of air raid sirens ringing out across Israel, forcing millions to take cover in bomb shelters, with a hospital in Beersheba being hit. Reacting to the news, Israel's defense minister described it as a war crime and called for the head of Iran's supreme leader.
I want to say that a dictator like Khamenei, who leads a country like Iran and has engraved on his flag the annihilation of the state of Israel, this terrible goal of destroying Israel, cannot continue to exist.
It's been a week where President Trump has been weighing up one of the most consequential decisions he's ever had to make as America's commander-in-chief, whether to become involved in a direct war with Iran and with it cooperate in the attempt to wipe out the country's nuclear enrichment facilities in Fordow, 80 metres below the earth, using the only weaponry in the world said to be capable of reaching far enough to destroy it. By Thursday, Trump announced the decision would be made within 2 weeks, with the president's own cabinet at odds over the evidence justifying the potential attack. His own National Intelligence Director, Tulsi Gabbard, recently testified that Iran wasn't actively pursuing a bomb, intelligence he dismissed.
Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having.
It's also been a week of protests against over-tourism in Europe, with coordinated demonstrations taking place in 11 cities across Spain, Portugal and Italy. Water pistols have been back out in Barcelona, targeting tourists as hundreds protested on Las Ramblas. "Your holiday, our misery," they chanted. In Lisbon, they staged the eviction of the patron saint of the city, St. Anthony. And in Venice, there have been demonstrations, with more to come, against the city turning into a playground for the wealthy, as the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos, arrives in town on Tuesday for a 3-day wedding event as he marries journalist Lauren Sanchez. No space for Bezos, and see you next Tuesday, say the subtle and not so subtle placards.
It's going to be impossible to get around, to live in this town that's more and more being sold off to tourists, to stars and billionaires.
We're not against them getting married, but we young people are struggling every day in this city where it's become impossible to find a place to live. All it took was the ultimate billionaire and everything was easy for him.
And let's meet the panel tonight. A great friend of the programme, Anne Bagamarie. Good evening, Anne. Independent international journalist reporting on US affairs since the late 70s, with Forbes magazine onwards, covering Europe for the past 4.5 decades. Senior editor for the International Herald Tribune, former International New York Times reporter as well. We're also seeing here an image, not of you, Anne. It is brilliant to have you, but I'm going to mention who this is. This is the new C that you just saw there. She is the new head of the MI6, the intelligence service in the UK, Blaise Maître-Wallé. Now, up until now, if we can see the image again, she was Q. That was her single letter. She was in charge of technology. Here's the thing. It's not just an alphabet change. She spent an entire career anonymous, incognito, for 26 years. So the world now knows somebody in the family or next door is like Judi Dench was in James Bond. My question to you is, how would you feel if you discovered your neighbour was a secret spy?
Well, I'd want to sit down with her immediately and pour her a few drinks and get her to dish, because now that everybody knows who she is, she can tell her stories, and I would want her to tell them to me.
Interestingly, the top answers given by European intelligence officers on their cover jobs as what they do or say they do includes the researchers working in the Foreign Office, and journalists and professors. Which brings me to our next guest, journalist and professor Aisha Gulsert. Evening.
Good evening.
Coincidence. Independent journalist, contributor to the New York Times, The Atlantic, The New Yorker, Le Monde, Le Figaro, and professor of journalism at Sciences Po University here in Paris. Aisha Gul, if you were trying to hide your real job as a professor and a journalist, what would you say to get people off your back if you were a spy?
I would say that I work in a circus. Because politics and journalism the political arena has become like a circus. So I think people believe it, and it wouldn't be really lying.
And tell me about, for your real job, what's been the point of focus for you this week?
Been trying to explain to the young students that there is still hope, that they should continue their higher education, to believe in politics and journalism, which is what we do at Sciences Po mainly, and that the world is not as dark as it looks with the wars.
Does that take a tangible hit when things look so bleak, when we are seeing multiple wars and world crises, on people's enthusiasm for journalism?
I think every generation has something, but what I've noticed with our students at Sciences Po is that the environment for a very long time in the climate change was a big deal. And now more and more, especially with the elections in the US, with what's going on in the Middle East, they are wondering if the world will still be standing when they'll be graduating. And I tell them that I was in their shoes 20 plus years ago when I was a student in politics and journalism, and the world is still standing.
Great to have you with us, Aishul, as always. Let's go to Nairobi. Let's bring in Eric Randolph. Evening, Eric. Eric's East Africa
Hello,
acting.
how are you?
I'm good, and great to have you with us. Bureau Chief for Agence France Presse, acting Senior Bureau Chief, formerly in Iran, Turkey, France, India, Southeast Asia and beyond. Eric, there's a lot to discuss, as you were, I just said, AFP's Iran correspondent in Tehran from 2016 to 2019. We're going to go into greater detail in a moment, but what have you made of the speed of developments in the past week?
Well, I think the scariest thing for me has been exchanging text messages with friends in Iran, and especially the fact that as of a couple of days ago, they've gone completely quiet because the internet's been almost entirely shut off now in Iran. And there really is a deafening silence coming from friends over there. So it's a scary time.
Yeah, noticeable with our correspondent as well, Saeed Azimi. Speaking to him just half an hour ago, mobile coverage also affected. He dropped out suddenly. To Tel Aviv, we're also joined tonight by one of Israel's most influential journalists, Gideon Levy. Good evening, Gideon. Great to have you being with us as well tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Worth saying, Gideon, columnist for Haaretz publication, joined in 1982, worked as deputy editor from 1983. Since 1988, written a column called The Twilight Zone on the hardships faced by Palestinians in the occupied territories. Gideon's also the author of The Punishment of Gaza, has received the most acclaimed prize in Israeli journalism, the Sokolov Award in 2021, honouring, Gideon, your courageous work in enriching public discourse by challenging conventions. I think I'm also right in saying you've been shot at by the IDF, received death threats, labelled a security risk by a former right-wing minister. Gideon, it is great to have you with us, and given what I've just said, for what it's been like for you, what's this last week been like in terms of the conversations you've been having with government insiders and how your reputation influences or not what people on the inside say to you?
I am not in the influential circle for many years. They'd rather not listen to me, and if they could shut my mouth, they would have done it. But this was a very challenging week, maybe one of the most challenging weeks that Israel knew. And we are really in the eye of the storm. So, you know, many times I look around and I say, this is not real. We are in a film, right? Well, only when we'll wake up from this reality, we will realize how deep it was, how many scars we will carry from this week and maybe many weeks to come. And still, I must tell you one thing. Whatever we are going through now as Israelis has nothing to do with what the people of Gaza are going through in the last 20 months. And each time I'm running to the shelter, each time I'm hearing the siren or hearing the booms in the sky, and believe me, they are very frightening, I can't help thinking about my fellow Palestinians, my friends in Gaza, who don't have one single shelter, who are going through this for the last 20 months, totally helpless.
Gideon, it's great to have you with us. Let's head into the storm of the past week. A week into the Israel-Iran conflict, we now know more details about how Israel pulled off a surprise attacks, how its air force since gained control of much of the skies above Tehran, including the strategic feint designed to catch Iran off guard. If we go back towards the end of last week, a spokesperson for Benjamin Netanyahu said the Israeli Prime Minister will be spending the weekend on holiday on the northern coast ahead of his son's wedding on the Monday. The US was meanwhile planning the 6th round of nuclear talks with Iran in Oman. Nothing to see here, no reason for Tehran to be immediately suspicious. The US president knew the attack was coming, we're told, but preferred the diplomatic path. And according to the news agency Axios, Netanyahu only notified Trump at the last minute of Operation Rising Lion that started in the early hours of Friday. Well, since then, there have been round-the-clock airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites, more than 100 military bases and missile launch facilities targeted. Extraordinary details of the assassination of military chiefs, nuclear scientists. The Iranian regime says 224 people have been killed. Israel says 25 of its civilians have now been killed by retaliatory Iranian missiles. Gideon, let's start with your assessment of Israel's military success on the ground so far. What's your reading?
No doubt it's very impressive. No doubt the achievements are really unprecedented. It puts some question mark about the power, the strength of Iran from the first place, because for years we were told about the great Iran with all the missiles and drones and God knows what. Israeli jets are flying over Iran like they could fly over Tel Aviv. No air defense, nothing. But let's not celebrate before the time. It is just the beginning. It is a very, very dangerous adventure that Israel took upon itself. It might end well. It might end badly. I'm not sure that it will end in a way that people will really feel better and more secure in Israel or elsewhere, because we all have to remember Iran is very important. But by the end of the day, as long as Israel continues with the occupation, with the apartheid, with the mass killing in Gaza, they are killing now around 100 people a day, all of them innocent people, all of them. As long as all this will continue, no Iranian victory, no Israeli victory over Iran will solve the real problem.
You've mentioned, I think, Gideon, just listening to press reports in the past few days, I'd be interested in your take on this, because we've talked about, right at the start of this conflict a week ago, that there was a plan in place for 14 days of operations against Iranian targets, according to sources within the Israeli government. We're into day 8. Is that what you're hearing, or is that changing day by day?
First of all, they say that they are far behind the schedule, but it's not science. Things can get out of control, things can get complicated, and above all, the main question which everyone is asking, what is the role that the United States is going to play? We are all waiting to what will a very unpredictable American president do. In the morning, he says one thing. In the evening, he says the opposite. And it all depends on him now. It might take another 1 or 2 weeks. It might take another 1 or 2 months. And God forbid, it might take 1 or more or 2 years. I must remind you, the Iran-Iraq war took 10 years. So let's not sum it up when it hardly started. I hope it will end as soon as possible, because from now on, any day that comes might complicate the picture much more, the casualties in both sides. And above all, what is the goal, and is it achievable?
Eric, listening to Gideon's points, particularly when he talks about the success and the sense of, if not quite a paper tiger, certainly the narrative that we heard before and the fear induced by the regime in Iran. I wonder, you've written extensively on Iran. Have you been surprised by the speed of Israel's control of the skies and its ability to operate in Iranian territory?
I think a year ago I would have been surprised, but the speed with which Iran's network around the region collapsed in the second half of last year, when Israel started targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon, targeted Iraqi militias, and then with the surprise departure of Assad from Syria, that I think that was the shocking moment when you realized that Iran, which had been this incredibly strong position right up until the Hamas attack in October 2023, and appeared to be constantly keeping Israel under pressure, suddenly Israel showed remarkable effectiveness in debilitating so much of that network. And now it's shown that Iran, after years of corruption and mismanagement and believing that it could use those proxy forces around the region to protect itself, but once those were gone, it didn't really have nearly the level of defenses that many people assumed. And we also have to remember that Israel has been planning this attack for decades, in some form or another, and so yeah, it all feels like it's crumbled very quickly for Iran.
Aishagul, as Eric says, crumble very quickly. What's your take on the scale of this conflict and the potential to either spiral or to produce seismic change in the Middle East?
Look, Iran, the regime in Iran since 1979 has done everything in its possibility in order to destabilize the Middle East. So it's true that nowadays we are talking about usually the United States as the disruptor in the Middle East, which it has been indeed. I do remember Iraq 2003, and there are a lot of parallels that we are actually drawing between can another country, especially a superpower, so to say, as the United States, does it have the legitimate right to go into another country? We do remember the whole argumentation at the United Nations about, Iraq and about Saddam Hussein being the evil and Iraq having the weapons of mass destruction. So there, it echoes with today with what we hear from the Western countries and from the United States in a way about Iran being a regime of evil and about being very close to nuclear possibilities and capacities. All this is true. The problem, and I'm not saying that the Iranian regime of the mullahs have been, heaven on earth in a way. What they have been conducted for decades is nothing but a slaughterhouse in their own beautiful country. Being from Turkey, it's my neighbor who is bleeding today, tomorrow it can be me. And having grown up in Turkey during the Iran-Iraq war that Gideon Levy mentioned that lasted 10 years, I do remember those 90s as well. But what really is different and it really scares me today is this whole idea of the international law that is almost not important in terms of there's a real red line that has been passed. I mean, when I did hear yesterday Mr. Netanyahu say that this was the fact that a hospital was bombed in Israel is a war against humanity, is a crime of war, I would like to paraphrase in a very bad way the Gideon Levy, for whom I have such respect and admiration. And in terms of for 20 months, the Palestinian refugee camps, schools, hospitals, homes, streets have been completely crushed, demolished, to use a word, turned into rubble by these Israelis, by the Israeli government. And that's what we see today, and that's what I was trying to get at. It's almost like there's no law, that today's world is led by people like Mr. Trump and Mr. Netanyahu, and of course there's Mr. Xi Jinping and Erdogan and Putin, who actually have no, consideration for international law or international alliances, which we saw again this week with the G7, with Donald Trump, who stayed, 24 hours in a meeting where actually he was with his peers. There's this, arrogance in today's international politics that I think is the dangerous place to be.
Let's try and unpick some of the legal questions that Aishagul raises, and Gideon as well to an extent, and you've looked into the legal sphere for some time as well. It's been part of one of your many areas that you look at in journalism. To look, first of all, when we talk about what you mentioned to Gaza, we've heard, I interviewed Martin Griffiths recently, the former humanitarian chief for UNHCR, using the term genocide. Is currently being looked at by the International Court of Justice. Israel's case. Israel says this comes down to proportionality with the Geneva Convention. We had this situation with the European hospital in Gaza, didn't we, bombed the other week, to which people died, 27 people, and Israel said that they had found Mohammed Sinwar, the current Hamas leader. So it currently says it denies that. It's about proportionality. The figures are huge, 54 or more thousand people dead. A quarter of those, says the Hamas-run health authority, children. And then we get on to Iran. So the legal question right now, and appears to be that Israel quoting self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter for Justification, saying its nuclear strikes are preventative self-defense. What do you make of that?
Well, I can only echo what Aishagul has said, which is that the parallels with other misadventures in the Middle East, especially the 2003 Iraq war over weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist, that has reverberations today, and it is shocking to think that we're back here again. As far as international law is concerned, I also echo Aishagul. I don't think anybody cares anymore where the lines are. I think it's become a matter of certain leaders, so to speak, of countries in this world deciding that the law is what they say it is. And if you're looking for a good justification to go to war, well, I mean, in 2003, they tried weapons of mass destruction in the United States, and look how that came out. Interestingly, though, that sort of PTSD from that whole misadventure in the Middle East is now coming to haunt Donald Trump and his party in the United States. The Republican Party, which in many instances is foursquare behind the current president, in this case is so fractured over the idea of whether America should get involved in this at all. And the strongest proponents in the party are of restraint. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who you'd think would support Donald Trump if he committed murder on the streets of New York, as he said he always could do and get away with it. They're telling him, this is not why we backed you. You have said over and over again, no foreign wars. His own vice president doesn't want any of this. And so I'm not surprised, for example, that he took 2 weeks, that Donald Trump has said, I need 2 weeks I'll let you know what happens in 2 weeks. On the one hand, you'd think this is just a showman trying to keep the spotlight trained on him. But on the other hand, he has got a huge, huge problem of whether America should get involved in this. The arguments against are very, very strong. Notably, that to get involved in a misadventure like that, to be the only country which has the weapons that could potentially achieve the military and strategic goal that Israel says it has, which is to destroy the nuclear facility at Fordow. Israel can't do it on its own. It needs the U.S. It has launched itself into this misadventure and is now hoping the U.S. will come along as the U.S. has done for decades and get them out of a mess. Donald Trump, from his domestic politics to what he promised in the campaign to all kinds of other considerations, including financial. The U.S. has $34 trillion in debt. Can we really afford this? Everything is pushing him to say, no, we can't do this. There are huge consequences for that on the world stage. But it's Donald Trump. He loves his show of force. He loves his other strongmen leaders like Netanyahu. And so the big question mark now is, what in a lawless world where one person's gut causes him to, and not the advice of many smart people, will cause him to make the decision, what is he going to do? You raised 2 points to which you want to put both to Gideon and to Eric. Gideon first, when we look at, do you see the ghosts of Iraq, as Anne mentioned, and also Aishagul too, in the old cliche, the saying that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes?
Can you repeat it? I didn't hear it, sorry.
Do you see the ghosts of Iraq in what's going on with...
Yes.
Is that a fair comparison?
Sure. No, I don't see the ghosts of Iraq because it is different, because in Iraq, it was a big lie. In Iran, it might be an exaggeration. The fact that Iran has an ambition or is in a race toward a nuclear bomb is quite accepted by everyone. The question is, how far are they from a bomb? And I didn't see any smoking gun here. Israel claims they were just few weeks from a bomb. This is one scenario. But American information agencies said something else. So I really don't know, but maybe we are again treated like with Iraq, and maybe not. I don't have the answer. By the end of the day, I have no doubts about one thing. War should always be the last option. And I'm not sure that we use the war as a last option. I'm not sure at all. The same things and maybe better things can be achieved by diplomacy in most of the cases. But unfortunately, Israel always, and especially in the last 2 years, Israel always would prefer war as the first option and not believe in any kind of agreements, negotiations, compromises. This is not anymore Israel's language.
I think you said, Gideon, this week, and I think I'm right in saying that you were just looking at the situation, how the Israeli military are framing this right now, because on Sunday, the Israeli military said the principal war footing for its military is now in Iran. The secondary theatre of war is Gaza. But your point is that Iran is a sideshow. What really needs to be sorted in the long term, even though the Israelis might not realise, is Gaza.
Not only Israelis, unfortunately also the world start to forget about Gaza. Gaza is 2.3 million people in a horrible catastrophe. I don't even have enough words to express what's going on in Gaza in recent days. And I have the feeling in Israel nobody cares because nobody cares about the people of Gaza ever since the 7th of October. But I have the feeling that also the world is forgetting Gaza. And this is unacceptable. Okay, Iran's strategy, nuclear, very important. But what about those people who are slaughtered there on a daily basis? Do you know that in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 days, it was at least 100 victims a day, all of them, or almost all of them, on the line to wait for some food? I mean, this man slaughtering is something that we can live with, and Israel is using the fact that the focus of the world is not in Gaza in order, God knows why, but in order to really become more and more barbaric toward the people of Gaza. They are now evacuating them from one place to the other like sheep. The space that they have now, the secure spaces that are left to the people of Gaza are like 10 or 20% of the Gaza Strip, 2.3 million people. How would they live? The whole project of the humanitarian aid was one big fiasco with so much blood mixing with the flour that they are distributing. I mean, we should talk about Iran, but even not for 1 minute to forget Gaza. And I have the feeling that Israel wants us to forget Gaza, and we shouldn't let it happen.
Yep.
That's a good point. Gideon, Eric, let's go to you in Nairobi. Just off the back of Gideon's thought, there's news coming in from the meeting going on in Geneva as we speak. It's just finished, 3.5 hours of talks between European foreign chiefs, Britain, France, Germany there as well, the EU, plus the Iranian foreign minister. And the German foreign minister has come out of the meeting saying we leave the room with the impression that the Iranian side is fundamentally ready to continue talking about important issues. I don't read from that, Eric, there's a significant breakthrough there, but it's not a no. What do you make of it?
Yes, I think the Europeans find themselves a bit unsure about where to go with this. I think the problem that everybody has here is that Israel, its intentions, many people are arguing, are to distract attention from Gaza, and that certainly helps in Israel's view. But looking at the attacks that they've carried out over the last week, it seems pretty clear that Israel's goal is ultimately regime change. The assassinations that they've carried out against senior military leaders in the Revolutionary Guards and many other members of the regime suggest that they are looking to topple the regime. Netanyahu hasn't hidden the fact that he would like to see an uprising. He's called on Iranians to rise up, and that the regime is very worried about that. And I think for the world watching, the terrifying parallel is not necessarily the war itself in 2003, but having learned of the aftermath of what happens when you topple a regime. Iran is not Iraq. doesn't have quite the same level of divisions along ethnic and religious lines that Iraq does, but it is still divided. And most of all, you would have so many different groups competing for power within Iran afterwards. It's absolutely unclear what kind of plan Israel would have for who is supposed to take over. Anybody who's ever had to spend any time in Iranian Twitter, talking to the diaspora of the millions of Iranians who have left their country over the last 45 years, will know that it can be an extremely combative environment. They are currently tearing themselves apart over whether they should be supporting these actions by Israel so that it topples their hated regime, or whether they should be supporting the regime against an outside aggressor in Netanyahu. So I think the real challenge now, and also to mention that however much Israel manages to take out the missile defenses, and even if it manages to destroy its nuclear capabilities, the Revolutionary Guards inside Iran still have a huge arsenal of weapons that they've shown time and time again they're more than happy to turn on their own citizens. If it comes down to defending the regime to the last man, they'll be willing to do it. So a huge question marks over where this is supposed to go next, and I think that's what makes it so difficult for the international community to know where they're supposed to stand on this. And
that, I think, explains, Eric, doesn't it, the pressure on President Trump, the consequences, the implications of his decision. Let's just try and look through the anatomy of the week for President Trump and look what was going on, because Monday and Tuesday was the G7 summit in Alberta, Canada, the conflict naturally dominating the agenda, but President Trump left early, in fact, straight after the family photo. This is how it played out.
President, any statement on why you're leaving the G7 early for Washington?
Well, I have to be back. Very important. I want to just thank our great host. He did a fantastic job. Thank you in Canada. But you probably see what I see, and I have to be back as soon as I can. We're going to have dinner with these wonderful leaders, and then I get on the plane. I have to be back early.
Have you heard about National Security Council?
I loved it. I tell you, I loved it. And I think we got a lot done. Really a lot done.
There's no comment from Macron and Carney. Now, President Macron gave his own thought on Trump leaving, which ended with him feeling the wrath of Trump hours later. This is what he said.
Il y a deux choses. La première, le président s'est exprimé il y a quelques minutes pour dire qu'il y avait des discussions qui étaient en cours, ce qui est une bonne chose. Et donc, si les États-Unis d'Amérique peuvent obtenir un cessez-le-feu, c'est une très bonne chose. Et la France le soutiendra et nous le souhaitons.
So President Macron says President Trump left to seek a possible route to a ceasefire. Here's Donald Trump's Truth Social reply to that. He talks about publicity-seeking. President Emmanuel Macron of France mistakenly said, I left the summit to go back to DC to work on a ceasefire. Wrong. He's no idea where I am now. I'm on my way to Washington. It's nothing to do with a ceasefire. Much bigger than that. Whether purposely or not, Emmanuel always gets it wrong. Stay tuned. Icicle, what's going on?
Oh, God. The thing which is incredible is you know, at the G7 for me, there's one image. I don't know if you have it, but it's basically when Donald Trump had some papers that fell, and Keir Starmer of England just like literally went on his knees in order to get those papers to the superpower president. And for me, that's exactly it. It was kind of like all these years of what we've been talking about and what we're talking here, all five of us. You know, it's basically this. It's this G7, the European Union, is made of these today's world leaders who have zero backbone, that's the reason why we are seeing Gaza in the last 20 months as we have been seeing. That's why we have leaders like, Putin, Erdogan. I mean, not to put everything on the, but it's because of this fearfulness of the Europeans, and I would put also in a way Canada in that of what the U.S. might decide, the big boss what might decide. And there's a waiting and see. I mean, there's no reason why an American president at the G7 summit, which we should remember about a decade ago, it was a G8. I mean, Putin was one of those guys out there that we saw in Alberta. And there's no reason why the American president is above his other peers, the other leaders of and he should be leaving. That's one. The second thing I wanted to say is that there's a fearfulness, I think, and that's what Anne very rightly mentioned, about the U.S. not wanting to go to war again. The American public today, when you ask to them, do you think we should go to war? The answer, whether it's Democrats or Republicans or even undecided voters, is a big no. Because there are the scars, which is a word that was used by Gideon Levy. There are the scars of Vietnam. There are the scars of Iran-Iraq war, of the Iraq 2003, and especially of Afghanistan, which was a military fiasco. So again, the American troops, whether it's bombarding in a very specific way, Iran is in a way to go. And then, last but not least, if there's one thing that is good that's emerging, but that's really me pushing it in order to see something good, is that the Democrats in the US, which are very slow motion locomotion, finally the Republicans are also kind of turning towards, not turning their back, but criticizing Donald Trump, who might be going to war. Nobody wants another U.S. invasion or presence other than the NATO presence in the bases that the U.S. has in the Middle East. And that a word that Anne used, which was so right, there's a PTSD of the past wars and of the forever wars that the U.S. has led. And Iran is a big country, like Eric said, and Eric was right. Iran is a big bite. History has shown us that when there were empires and, Iran is something that you cannot just play with. And I think that the wise thing would be if there's a regime change to come, it's not to the U.S. or to Israel to decide that regime change should come from themselves, and they're getting there. It's just that it's taking long, but they're doing their best. I have faith more in the Iranian people than in the mullahs for sure, but in the leaders of the G7 of the European Union.
To Ajigor's point, Gideon, on 2 points there, Trump's decision, we talked about this a moment ago, pausing this decision now, familiar 2 weeks time period. We've seen this, haven't we, on President Putin, and we're still waiting for that decision 3 weeks on.
How can I foresee such a character like Donald Trump? I mean, seriously, I mean, he can change his mind 20 times in the coming 14 days, and nobody can foresee. I'm not sure he knows what he wants. And to be very frank with you, I'm even not sure that I know what I would like him to be. Because by the end of the day, I would like him to get back to the negotiation table with the Iranians, stop humiliating them like a little child, stop telling them that they have to surrender and call it a surrender, call them as equal partners to the negotiation table and try to make a deal with them. I think they would come if he would have treated them like equal partners and not like someone who already surrendered. It's a over 90 million big people, huge country with a lot of capabilities. They have a very, very tough and problematic and negative regime, no doubt about it. But you have to find a way for a solution instead of bombarding and bombarding and bombarding. This will not lead very far.
It's a very good point. There are two viral moments to which Ajigor has mentioned one already this week, and we're going to look at them, including Keir Starmer. They've dominated socials. They're both from the G7 as well. First, best guesses here, please. We can't call in lip readers because of another famous Meloni eye roll, but this is the moment, if there's any intel on why or what or who Giorgia Meloni is rolling her eyes at this week. Let's take a look. Her hushed conversation with Emmanuel Macron.
No. Sorry, I'll just wait for...
Keir Starmer looking a little isolated there, and now she's normally rolling her eyes at Macron. There's something kind of BFF-y. There's something going on that table about somebody on that table.
Yeah, I've got a lot of sympathy for someone who has no poker face. I don't have one either. It's impossible for me to mask what I'm feeling, especially if I'm feeling contempt or just what the, when somebody's saying that. I think it's the toughest job in the world right now is to be an editorial writer. Asked to write something that tries to understand the role of the various players in this crisis and then try to give advice to, especially to the American president, because he's given us this 2-week window. We don't know who he's talking to. That's the subject of lots of articles. He's not talking to his director of national intelligence or central intelligence because he doesn't believe what she says. He's not talking to the Secretary of Defense for a variety of reasons. And some people may think that's a good thing because he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. But who is he taking advice from? Everything about this particular crisis is in line with this presidency, which is that it breaks the norms, especially in foreign policy, that have existed for 50 years. So you've got, and Gideon pointed this out so well, you've got a situation where diplomacy would be called for, making a multilateral agreement among the partners and the allies and maybe even the adversaries on some level to decide how to deal with this. I've read so many articles this week about that. And all I want to say is, have you met Donald Trump? If this is the solution that's called for now, do not look to the White House to provide this. And maybe what we all have to do is kind of hold our breath and expect the worst. But that's what this presidency is all about. He wants us not to know what he's doing. Maybe he doesn't know what he's doing. But to say then that the way we're all going to get out of this with our lives and our countries and our sanity intact is to rely on old-fashioned diplomacy from someone with a great strategic and collegial view of the world, we're blowing smoke.
Blowing smoke. Must mention the second image just to understand what was going on here, because two massive gaffes. This was Keir Starmer's big moment, as Aishka mentioned, 5 years in the making. Negotiations leading to a framework trade deal between the US and UK this week. The big signing ceremony at the G7. What could possibly go wrong?
Okay, thank you very much. We all know the great Prime Minister of the UK, and we just signed a document. This is, sorry about that. A very important document. A little windy out here. Give me that. We just signed it, and it's done. And so we have our trade agreement with the European Union.
I don't know what's worse, the crouching in front of Trump, the dropping of the papers, or calling the UK the European Union, probably all three. Which takes us to Europe and to the world's third richest man here this week, Amazon boss Jeff Bezos and his fiancée, the journalist Lauren Sanchez, somewhere off the coast of Portofino in Italy right now on his $500 million super yacht, Kourou. Their staff making preparations for what the Telegraph and also the Sun newspaper this week and also LBC and the US Weekly call the wedding of the century, though Elle magazine calls it Jeff Bezos' over-the-top Venetian wedding weekends. Protesters gathering Sunday this week, unveiling a huge banner. No space for Bezos, it read, warning they're planning to disrupt the days, jumping into the canals, blocking the narrow streets. The Bezos-Sanchez PR team have said that this is an event that is only going to benefit the community. And it's reported the total spent is around $10 million on the wedding. But the protest that began in Venice on Sunday wasn't just against Bezos, it was also about over-tourism. We've seen other movements in Spain and Portugal this week. Eric, to you, is there some sympathy? I was listening to the mayor of Venice this weekend and said it's not Bezos' fault. There should be some support because of the amount of money he's given to the area. Which side would you take on that?
Sympathy for Bezos. I'm going to pass. I'm going to pass on that. I just, do you lose all sense of taste and decency after you become super rich, or do you start off like that and therefore you're the type of person who wants to become super rich? It's the great riddle. I don't know. It's a bit grotesque. I guess I feel a little bit of sympathy with the people who worry that there are too many tourists in their town. I've been caught up in the streets in Venice and felt like I was in a mosh pit, just trying to walk down the road. So I guess that can be pretty annoying. I would suggest to everybody to come on holiday to Kenya, which is one of the most beautiful places on the planet and needs a few more tourists. So please do that instead.
It's an interesting point, actually, into which, are we not seeing that reflected in any major African cities at all? They're not having any sense of these Europeans over-tourism protests.
No, not at all. The problem we've got here is that actually it's quite expensive to get here. So you end up with, it's quite an expensive holiday. I think the problem is ever since it became so easy and so cheap to fly around, everybody, piles into these European cities. And it's understandable because it's very nice. But you're missing out, guys. Beautiful beaches, lions, giraffes, elephants. We've got it all.
I want to give, you've almost convinced us all, want to give both Gideon, Aysegul and Anne 30 seconds each for the end of the programme on where your sympathies lie on this, and starting with you because you've looked a long time about law and luxury goods as well in your journalism.
Oh, I'm totally with the people of Venice. Their city is sinking, literally and figuratively. A couple of years ago, they passed a crucial threshold where there were less than 50,000 full-time inhabitants in the city. Meanwhile, 20 million tourists come every year. There's this very easy love of officialdom for tourism to bring in money. And, Paris is not immune. So I am absolutely foursquare behind the people of Venice. When I go to Venice, I try very hard to leave a small footprint and to support local business. But I guess because I go to Venice, I'm part of the problem too. But, yeah.
Gideon, a brief thought, if you have one, on the big Jeff Bezos wedding.
I remember the first time I visited Venice, I guess it was much before all of you were born. And I remember my last time in Venice a few years ago. At my last time in Venice, I swear to myself, and I'm not sure I will follow it, but I swear to myself, never again. I don't get back to this place. What this went through, and it's, by the way, it's not only Venice, it's Florence, it's Paris, it's Rome, it's so many places which were totally destroyed by those mass tourists. And I don't know what is the answer for this, but it's very sad to see those places.
And that was going on a long time. Yeah.
Go to Africa.
Yeah, great to hear you, Gideon. 5 or 10 seconds, but I want to give you the last word. Aysegul, will you be watching the wedding next week?
We will be, and we will be visiting Eric Rudolph in Kenya as well. So I wish you a good weekend. And Eric, instead of Airbnb, will be calling you.
Thank you all. Aysegul, thank you so much. To the panel tonight, a unique experience, insight, clarity from Tel Aviv, Gideon Levy, author and columnist at Haaretz. Nairobi, Eric Randolph, Bureau Chief at Agence Foreign Press, and also Anne Bagamarie, Aysegul Sert, independent journalists. Thank you for watching. We are halfway through the year. As we enter Midsummer Weekend, to quote Shakespeare's book, farewell, thou lob of spirits, I'll be gone. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in 7 days for the world next week.
Where are you from?
Nigeria.
Welcome to Russia.
Thank you very much. Applied à la Gustade.
They come from Nigeria, Senegal, Ghana or Cameroon.
He told us there is a job opportunity over here in Russia, which is security work in a sense of maybe like in front of a bank.
Africans who are falling into the Russian trap.
But then they are saying we signed a contract to go to the war front.
Cannon fodder, enlisted with no going back.
You can't go out anywhere, even if you are going to private. The security and the military escort you.
We entered the army by mistake. They betrayed us.
Watch Reporters, Putin's Infantry on France 24 and France24.com.